Hello, today on my channel you will hear an amazing story about life. I hope you enjoy this story. This one struck me to the core. Honestly, I still can't forget it. Enjoy watching.
Understand, I've always dreamed of the sky, Julia said inspiringly. The sky is my element. So, you are 25 years old, said Barry, deputy director of the airline, carefully choosing words. Not the best age for a stewardess, you'd agree. It's a great age, Julia blurted out. I already calculated everything. You're signing me up right now, and at 45 I'll have my pension. I'll be useful to the company for a very long time. I have the health of a 20-year-old. I've been skydiving since high school. We can see that, Barry nodded, flipping through the papers. You see, we don't look at every candidate so closely. As you can see, I called a whole meeting on your question. He circled his subordinates with his hand. While Julia stood at the whiteboard like a student, 5 people stared at her. The most unpleasant and intense stare was that of the female hijacker of indeterminate age. She wore a white blouse and a dark jacket, and she kept fixing her hair. It made her head look like a bird's nest. You see, Julia, Barry continued, may I address you that way? Our company is one big family. We're all on a first-name basis. Of course, said the applicant. Family is the most important thing in life. Absolutely, nodded the man. Our company is a family. If you become one of us, you will be changed forever. However, there are certain requirements. Let's say standards. Those who fall short of them can also be specialists, but probably in other fields. But I am competent. Julia interrupted him. Go on, ask me something else. Barry wiped the sweat from his forehead. In the hour that the interview had lasted, everyone had asked her at least 5 questions. She answered without hesitation or error, in a clear and steady voice. She showed how to use a life jacket and mask, how to apply a bandage, how to perform artificial respiration. How much does a stewardess need to know? Your English, continued Barry. Language. What's wrong with that? The future stewardess was surprised. I speak and write well. I passed the test. Exactly, nodded the deputy director. You have a very high level of language skills. You could be a consultant. You could even be an assistant manager. But I don't want to, Julia objected. I have the dream, to be a flight attendant. I close my eyes and I see the sky. I hear the hum of the engines. I passed all my exams with flying colors past the boards. Is my dream unrealizable? Eicher exhaled angrily. She was the one who had given her the necessary referrals a month ago. It was just that she'd left her children out. In her search for a new job, she had stopped disclosing her marital status. Now, looking through her paperwork after all the tests, the receptionist was desperately looking for something to hold on to. Yes, you passed all the tests brilliantly. You are in good health, exhaled the deputy director. But what are you doing to her, Barry? The head of the personnel department asked haughtily and looked up at the applicant. Tell me honestly, my dear, will our plane take off with all that ballast? I apologize. Julia smiled nervously, feeling as if she had just been stripped and thrown into icy water. I'm in great shape. Look for yourself. Looking at the figure of the future stewardess, it was impossible to believe that she had already become a mother 3 times. Friends said that it was all due to genetics. Julia thought that the slim figure on one half is associated with constant physical activity around children, on the other half with poverty. She denied herself everything, even foods that could make her gain weight. I'm not talking about your figure, honey, said the woman with the disgusting hair. It's about your children. What's wrong with them? Julia wondered. They're nice, adorable babies. Besides, I wasn't going to take them on any voyages. There was laughter. Everyone smiled except the hijacker. She kept glaring at the applicant. The woman with the disgusting hair paused, flipped through the papers, and pulled out the birth certificates. There are 3 of them. The head of the personnel department blurted out. Not one, not two, but three. And you've only just turned 25. You could have that many more, can't you? Julia was embarrassed. And why did everyone reproach her with children? First, her ex-husband, who had taken an active part in the growth of the family and then fled the battlefield. Then the parents, who were morally hard to accept the rejected daughter back. And then there are teachers, educators, doctors, officials. My children are my wealth, Julia replied, furtively wiping away a tear. Besides, I'm not planning any new ones, so I won't go on maternity leave. The men smiled again. Barry took copies of the birth certificates from the receptionist and looked at them carefully. The other man winked furtively at the applicant and moved forward a little. I like her, he said. My name is Paul, Julia, and I'm a public relations specialist. You're so perky. You're so good at taking a punch. And you don't lose your temper when you're getting criticized. I think that's the best thing about flying. Let's not forget that passengers are big kids, and our heroine has 3 of them. Yes, but, exhaled Barry, gesturing for Paul to interrupt. What other opinions do you have? I think we've got all the information, so we should move on to the discussion. Shall I go out? The candidate asked timidly. Barry shook his head in the negative and pointed to a chair. The staff began to confer, but Julia could only pick out a few words from the general hard worker, cat, divorcee with a trailer. The girl was ready to cry, but she dreamed of the sky, and no one would dare call her lazy. When Jack was 2 years old, she put him in kindergarten and went to work, became a clerk at the clinic. A mother of many children has no time for nonsense. Therefore, she was able to quickly organize her work and become an indispensable specialist. She liked everything, that she was appreciated, loved, and respected, congratulated on all holidays. But the salary, it was enough only for the most necessary things, and that if you buy it, promotions and sales. Julia closed her eyes and saw herself in 25 years. An old woman with a bloated figure, always sitting on herself. No money for a beautician, no money for the gym, no money for traveling. No, she can't do that. She has to change her life. Airline health insurance for the whole family, company gym, travel allowance. It's a dream come true. You know what? Julia blurted out as she watched the discussion. My future family. If you say no, I'll lose faith. Faith in people, you know. I know that Strut Flight is a real family. And I didn't come alone. I came with 3 kids. Just think what an asset this is. Paul smiled broadly again, and the deputy director sighed. He was already unhappy that such a trivial matter had been brought to his level. All that was left was for the general to be called in. But then he may well find a new deputy. I'd expressed my opinion, said the hijacker, pressing her lips together. Statistics show that mothers with many children spend up to half of their time on sick leave. Please note that our heroine did not find it necessary to inform me about her marital status when she received a referral to the medical commission. But it's all in the passport. Julia blurted out, I didn't hide anything. You didn't look, you gave me referrals and questions. And now you're reprimanding me. There was silence. It was so quiet that the ticking of the hands on Julia's watch could be heard. Paul wrote something on a piece of paper and showed it to his boss. They looked at each other. Good, Barry nodded after a long silence. I'll hire you, but on one condition. What the deputy director asked Julia was first shocking, then frightening. It's a deal, the woman replied, recovering a little. I agree. When can I start? Unlike every other person on Earth, Julia didn't consider the 3 little ones to be ballast. She had great children. The eldest, Elizabeth, was already 7 years old. A real pillar. She could boil sausages and pasta and pick up her brothers from kindergarten. Max was 5 years old and Jack was 4. After the spacious apartment of her husband and the house of his parents, they were cramped. Previously, each had his own room, and now they lived in 3s and even together with his mother. But the kids endured all the hardships. Evan didn't give up on his children. He even visited them, but not often. Once a month or less. Julia's heart bled when she saw Elizabeth and Max suffering. Jack's experience of his parents' divorce was a little easier. On the days that Evan visited his family, Julia's parents left the house. They couldn't bear to see their former son-in-law. "Why did you give me so many of them?" Julia dreamily asked her ex-husband during one of these meetings. "How do I feed them now?" "You'll feed them," Evan replied. "I gave you so much that you would crawl on your knees in front of me, begging me for every penny. Look how proud you are. We're divorced and we can't sleep together once a month." Julia had no decent words for her ex-husband. Using loopholes in the law, he paid her a pittance for all 3 children. The mom of many children suspected that Evan was actually making good money. He had a store, a tool rental business, a car repair business. Well, a penniless man can't drive a Mercedes and wear expensive shirts. "Max needs a jacket," Julia said, not noticing the disgusting words of her ex-husband. "And Elizabeth wants a guitar. She dreams of performing." "You know what?" Evan said. "You have kids and buy them everything yourself, and I pay child support." Tears sprang from Julia's eyes. She gave this callous, hypocritical man so much love and children, and he wipes his feet on her. The alimony did come to the card, but it was only enough for food, not even for clothes. "Evan, why are you doing this to them?" The woman asked, crying. "Okay, I hurt you, I ruined your life, I didn't love you enough. But what about Liska or Max or Jack? They're your kids. They're all yours. I know they're mine. My ex-husband said, you were often alone in my apartment, sometimes for days at a time, while I was working. What if you took someone to visit?" "How dare you?" said Julia, and indignation literally grabbed her by the throat. "I loved you so much, I loved you so much." Evan did leave her alone a lot. Family matters had passed him by. He didn't like them, thinking they weren't his concern. And he had no interest in other people's problems. He wasn't interested in how and what his wife lived now. He didn't care about his children. He didn't figure out what his mother was doing. Evan lived for himself without hiding his priorities. Immediately after the successful interview, Julia rushed to the HR department and wrote an application to be hired, to get a flight passport, in case they changed their minds. Then she went to the store and bought some goodies with the last of her money. The money was not enough, so she took 2 cans of Sprats, cheese, 2 loaves, mayonnaise to make their favorite sandwiches. The cake she got for half price was the last one in the Buy It Now section. After paying, she shamefully peeled off the sticker that read minus 50% off. On the shelf of goodies, she picked up the bananas, already darkened but free. She wanted to buy some more fruit, but there was no money left. A juice or soda would have been nice too. "I'm home," Julia said loudly. "Where are my kids?" Her parents had a beautiful 2.5-room house right in the city. A plot of land, albeit small, and no neighbors. But of course, it was a little cramped for the 6 of them. Both Mom and Dad had been sympathetic to her return. It was easier for her. They could take her grandchildren from school or kindergarten and feed them. Without them, she wouldn't have realized her dream. "I'm home," Julia repeated. There was silence in response. She saw that her mom's and dad's jackets were not on the hangers. She took out her phone. She'd forgotten to turn off the flight mode. She went up to the 2nd floor. Evan gathered the children around him and read them the story of Dr. Abelet. He was not very good at it, and some of the phrases he twisted. He laughed, satisfied with the silly joke. He had brought 3 hamburgers with him, which the children were now eating. Julia thought that with his income he could afford something more substantial, a couple of kilos of pork, pasta, fruit. But most importantly, toys, because the children had so few of them. "There's our mom," Evan announced. "Look, she brought a cake." He came over and unceremoniously inspected her bags. He put Sprats, loaf, mayonnaise on the table. Unhappily, he read the composition of the cake and scratched his finger in the place where there was a sticker -50%. "And this is what you feed our children?" he asked reproachfully. "Expired and indigo canned food." "It's a holiday," Julia replied. She had long since gotten used to ignoring her husband's barbs. "Do you want to celebrate together?" "No, thanks," Eden said. "I could hardly find time to visit my babies. I've got things to do, you know." "Come help in the kitchen," the woman said. "A word. You're so bossy." The ex-husband shouted. "You're a country bumpkin. You've never worked a day in your life. What are you teaching my children? I'm the head of the family here, and you will listen to me." Julia put the shopping back in her bag and walked out the door. Tears rolled down her cheeks. Evan preferred not to remember the reasons why she hadn't worked for so many years. He'd sworn to her, convinced her he loved her. And then he'd given her 3 children, one after the other. And then he'd thrown them out on the street. In the kitchen, she looked in the refrigerator. She had to make dinner for the whole family. She got on the pasta water and started making sandwiches. She cut the loaf into neat slices and toasted it a little in a frying pan with butter so it tasted better. Cooking calmed her down. Even with pasta and cheap ketchup, if you make pasta that tasted so good. When I make some money, I'll hire a psychologist, she thought, and get my degree. No, I'll become a psychologist myself. Ivan, who'd been yelling so much, did come over. He immediately grabbed the sprouts and cheese sandwich and began devouring it with gusto. Mayonnaise dripped on the floor, but her ex-husband didn't think to wipe the stain off with a napkin. He always behaved this way, not bothering with any domestic issues at all. She gave this callous, hypocritical man so much love and children, and he wipes his feet on her. The alimony did come to the card, but it was only enough for food, not even for clothes. "Evan, why are you doing this to them?" The woman asked, crying. "Okay, I hurt you, I ruined your life, I didn't love you enough. But what about Liska or Max or Jack? They're your kids. They're all yours. How are they're mine? My ex-husband said, you were often alone in my apartment, sometimes for days at a time, while I was working. What if you took someone to visit?" "How dare you?" said Julia, and indignation literally grabbed her by the throat. "I loved you so much, I loved you so much." Evan did leave her alone a lot. Family matters had passed him by. He didn't like them, thinking they weren't his concern. And he had no interest in other people's problems. He wasn't interested in how and what his wife lived now. He didn't care about his children. He didn't think about what his mother was doing. Evan lived for himself without hiding his priorities. Immediately after the successful interview, Julia rushed to the HR department and wrote an application to be hired to get a flight passport, in case they changed their minds. Then she went to the store and bought some goodies with the last of her money. The money was not enough, so she took 2 cans of sprats, cheese, 2 loaves, mayonnaise to make their favorite sandwiches. The cake she got for half price was the last one in the Buy It Now section. After paying, she shamefully peeled off the sticker that read -50% off. On the shelf of goodies, she picked up the bananas, already darkened but free. She wanted to buy some more fruit, but there was no money left. A juice or soda would have been nice too. "I'm home," Julia said loudly. "Where are my kids?" Her parents had a beautiful 2.5-room house right in the city. A plot of land, albeit small, and no neighbors. But of course, it was a little cramped for the 6 of them. Both Mom and Dad had been sympathetic to her return. It was easier for her. They could take her grandchildren from school or kindergarten and feed them. Without them, she wouldn't have realized her dream. "I'm home," Julia repeated. There was silence in response. She saw that her mom's and dad's jackets were not on the hangers. She took out her phone. She'd forgotten to turn off the flight mode. She went up to the 2nd floor. Evan gathered the children around him and read them the story of Dr. Abelet. He was not very good at it, and some of the phrases he twisted. He laughed, satisfied with the silly joke. He had brought 3 hamburgers with him, which the children were now eating. Julia thought that with his income he could afford something more substantial, a couple of kilos of pork, pasta, fruit. But most importantly, toys, because the children had so few of them. "There's our mom," Ivan announced. "Look, she brought a cake." He came over and unceremoniously inspected her bags. He put sprats, loaf, mayonnaise on the table. Unhappily, he read the composition of the cake and scratched his finger in the place where there was a sticker -50%. "And this is what you feed our children?" he asked reproachfully. "Expired and indigo canned food." "It's a holiday," Julia replied. She had long since gotten used to ignoring her husband's barbs. "Do you want to celebrate together?" "No, thanks," Eden said. "I could hardly find time to visit my babies. I've got things to do, you know." "Come help in the kitchen," the woman said. "A word. You're so bossy." The ex-husband shouted. "You're a country bumpkin. You've never worked a day in your life. What are you teaching my children? I'm the head of the family here, and you will listen to me." Julia put the shopping back in her bag and walked out the door. Tears rolled down her cheeks. Ivan preferred not to remember the reasons why she hadn't worked for so many years. He'd sworn to her, convinced her he loved her. And then he'd given her 3 children, one after the other. And then he'd thrown them out on the street. In the kitchen, she looked in the refrigerator. She had to make dinner for the whole family. She got on the pasta water and started making sandwiches. She cut the loaf into neat slices and toasted it a little in a frying pan with butter so it tasted better. Cooking calmed her down. Even with pasta and cheap ketchup, if you make pasta that tasted so good. "When I make some money, I'll hire a psychologist," she thought, "and get my degree. No, I'll become a psychologist myself." Ivan, who'd been yelling so much, did come over. He immediately grabbed the sprats and cheese sandwich and began devouring it with gusto. Mayonnaise dripped on the floor, but her ex-husband didn't think to wipe the stain off with a napkin. He always behaved this way, not bothering with any domestic issues at all. "Disgusting," he said, licking his greasy fingers. "You can't cook at all. Honestly, you're no good in bed either. You don't take any initiative. If you just come on your knees right now and zip your fly, unbuckle your belt, I'd melt right away. In fact, I dumped you because you don't know how to work with your hands and your head. Not in life, not in the kitchen, not in my pants." The water boiled just as Julia did. She thought how nice it would be to take a whole pot and pour it into that smug face. To make him agonize and suffer as she did. But no, she'd be arrested and locked up and the children would be left all alone. She wouldn't survive a long separation from her babies. "I have news for you," the woman said, barely containing her boiling anger. "I got a job, a new good job. You may have to pick up the kids from daycare and school yourself." "What? Are you going to work 12 hours for a penny again?" Ivan asked haughtily. "Why don't you crawl on your knees to me? I give you everything. But not for nothing, you understand?" "No," said the lady of the house. "I'm a flight attendant now, and I'll be flying planes abroad." "Wow," replied the ex-husband sarcastically. "And how is it that you were allowed to such a responsible job with such a huge trailer? Such ballast, the airplane just won't take off. And even if it did, you get all mixed up. You'll start putting out fires with vodka or cognac. Everyone knows that mothers with many children are the most worthless women in the world. And their kids are always messed up." "That's not all the news," Julia exhaled. "I'm going to make some money and hire a lawyer. He'll be—" Hearing his ex-wife's plans, Ivan's face twisted with anger. He jumped up from his chair, his hand raised, but he didn't hit Julia. "I'll never set foot in this house again," he said. "You can forget about all the money from now on. Oh, and you can take the kids, too, you understand." And he walked out, slamming the door loudly, so hard that the horseshoe, lovingly hung by Daddy for good luck, collapsed to the floor. She was to take her first flight 24 hours after the interview. Strut Flight valued responsible workers who were ready to act here and now. The day after the interview, Julia went to the HR department. She needed to provide a certificate to the kindergarten school, so that her kids would be given an after-school program in the future without a waiting list. At first, she was afraid that Mom and Dad would judge her choice, but they were enthusiastic about the new profession, even though during the flights they now had to pick up the children and watch them. The parents returned 30 minutes after Evan left, slamming the door loudly. "He came unannounced," Mom said. It's hard for us to sit in the same room with him. But the kids love it." Dad was surprised. "Well, what can you do, native blood?" "I have news," Julia smiled. "First of all, I've been hired. The day after tomorrow, I'm going on a voyage. They'll pay me a raise. We'll finally be able to buy new furniture." "That's great," Mom said. A tear of joy ran down her cheek. "Second, I finally talked to my hubby," Julia continued. "I told her that I will divide the property. A lawyer, of course, is expensive, but I'm sure it's necessary. I'm so proud of you." Mom said with delight, "You're so brave." "And beautiful," Dad added. "You'll find yourself a new man. You're clinging to that Ivan. He's a tyrant. I say another 5-letter word. It starts with M and ends with K." Now, when Julia arrived at HR, she felt absolutely confident. From now on, no woman would dare accuse her of being a divorcee with a trailer. She was now a stewardess, a flight attendant, a conqueror of the sky. Fortunately, the head of the department was not present. She was given her papers by a completely different girl, a pretty brunette with huge fingernails. "Welcome to the family," she said. "That's what I'm instructed to say. All in all, congratulations. You made the right choice." "Oh, I'm so happy," Julia waved her hand. "And I'm so worried. Will I do it?" "You'll be fine," replied the employee. She probably repeated that phrase a lot. "There's something else." "Yes," said the new flight attendant. "I'm listening to you very carefully." Paul asked to see him. The brunette shrugged. "About your project together." "So it wasn't a joke?" Julia wondered. "I thought they were messing with me." "Honey, we're serious here, no jokes," the brunette said. "People of Barry and Paul's caliber don't throw words around." "Well, not unless it's April Fool's Day. So I have to go," the mother of many children asked. The human resources lady nodded. The entire airline occupied a very small building of 5 floors. Whole departments had switched to telecommuting, and working from home was encouraged by management. But the public relations officer had his own office. "Thank you," nodded the mother of many children. She wanted to know if the man was really happy about her appointment, or if he was just following instructions. "Sweet Julia," smiled Paul. "I want to apologize on behalf of everyone who bullied you during the interview. Don't think that finding a flight attendant requires such extensive meetings. I'm the one who convinced the others to hire you." "I appreciate that," the woman replied. "You're the condition," the public relations officer shrugged. "We'll pay for the internship, but you'll do it in a truncated form." "Why do you need it?" "You already know everything. Just one flight and you are accepted." "Thank you," Julia smiled. "I can't wait to get started." "Record your first flight as stories on your cell phone," Paul said. "The more the better. Let it all come from the heart, no pre-prepared stories. Then try to compile them into a video. If it doesn't work out, that's fine. My boys and girls will do it." "Your guys?" the mom of many children asked. "You're the only one here." "Yeah," Paul smiled. "We try not to keep people in the office." "Why?" "I have a big team, 5 people. They all work from home. I call it freedom." "Then why are you sitting in the office yourself?" Julia wondered. "Let's use your first name," the public relations specialist asked. "We're family now. You see, I have such a big house, so modern, that it's impossible to work there. Plus, I have a hobby there." "I see. Well, can I go now?" the woman asked innocently. She liked Paul very much as a man. So neat, trim, tactful. The complete opposite of her ex-husband. She'd known no other lovers besides Ivan. She really wanted to find a man, if only for her body, but she thought it had been too long since the divorce. Hold on. There's something else, Paul said as she walked toward the door. He got up and came close to her, then ethical distance allowed. Julia smelled the sweet odor of his perfume, very expensive. He took her by the arm and around her waist. The woman almost laughed. She thought the man wanted to dance with her. You know, you have a great figure, Paul said. I needn't say it's textbook figure. I have a favor to ask. It's a strange one, but don't apologize. I'd like to. She was expecting him to slap her ass or maybe squeeze her in a tight corner. Alas, she was used to it. Her ex-husband never asked for her consent to intimacy. And inwardly she was ready to give Paul whatever he asked for. It was her nature to say no, and she wasn't at all good at it. But what the public relations specialist asked of her shook her to the core. The first flight is truly exciting and special. Before becoming a flight attendant, Julia had only flown on an airliner once. In her senior year of high school, she actually went to the aeronautics section. After a few weeks of training, they each made 5 skydives. Then Evan came into her life, and the first thing he told her not to do was dream of the sky. Instead of flying, she got a hard landing. First diapers and diapers, then nighttime vigils at the bedside of a sick child, squabbles at daycare. All of this was interesting, of course, but it didn't rise to the level of a dream at all. Walking up the sleeve to the airplane on her first flight, Julia couldn't escape the thought that what was happening was a dream. She immediately met her partner, a smiling blonde of 22. Congratulations. Aurora smiled broadly. It's great that you're going on your first flight with me. The girl hugged Julia warmly, kissed her cheek, and stroked her back. After the barbs of the interview, this attitude was unexpected. It was good that she didn't say that famous phrase, "Welcome to the family." However, the mother of many children really liked her new job. Soon the two of them were standing in a small compartment between the first-class cabin and the cockpit. She had only seen this in movies before. I'm excited too, Julia replied. God, I'm so nervous. Don't be afraid, Aurora said. You'll love it. If there is anything wrong, tell me right away. We'll fly to Charm. The weather's so hot. It's summer. We're spending the night there, so we'll go to the beach. We'll swim, meet some people. Just don't drink too much. You have to work early in the morning. That's great, agreed the new flight attendant. I loved Egypt. Of course, Julia was lying. This African country was not the fondest of memories. 3 years ago, they'd traveled there as a family, even though Jack had been a baby in Acts 2. Evan had managed to show his disgusting character on vacation. He was enough for one day when the 5 of them went to the beach, sat in a cafe, and rode camels. At 9 o'clock at night, he went out for a smoke and didn't come back until 2 days later. I'm on vacation. Evan shouted at her complaints. Get it through your head that since I'm paying for everything, I'm on vacation as I please. You take care of the kids. They're your kids, and I don't know anything about diapers or hygiene. Financial recriminations were a major part of their marriage. Of course, she couldn't work with 3 kids. She had to beg Evan for money for every little thing, even new underwear. Julia remembered that vacation and was upset. Aurora noticed the change in her partner's mood and immediately tried to reassure her. Don't worry, she said. Only 50 passengers, it's nothing. The 2 of us can easily handle them. Now everyone will sit down, eat, drink, and sleep. 5 hours and we'll be there. You have nothing to worry about. Thank you, Aurora, thanked Julia. Listen, there's a question. Her partner got a little embarrassed. Is it true that you're going to make a movie about us? Yes, nodded the mother of many children. Only Paul said it would be a little secret, and that I should keep it under wraps. Or was it a little secret? Yeah, I see, said Aurora sarcastically. So the whole crew knows about your little secret. That's strange, Julia wondered. Yet I talked about it in person. Tête-à-tête. And Barry was the one who set the task. It was Selena, explained her partner. The one who hired you. She told me that Shenka did something stupid. To make a movie like this and hire a mother with many children. She was very critical of him. Jenkett, Julia kept wondering, that's Barry, the deputy general? Yes, Aurora nodded. I'll never get used to it, sighed the mother of many children. It's all so simple. Barry Paul, no middle names, no last names. Paul's an interesting man, by the way, but he's a little strange. What do you mean? Aurora asked, and her eyes lit up. He offered me something. Julia hesitated, but I wouldn't want too many people to know about it. Oh, I have a grave, blurted out her partner. What did he harass you? What do you mean harassed you? I wouldn't call it harassment, Julia said grimly. It's just that he... Someone pulled back the curtain imperiously, and two brawny men entered the small carriage space. Even if they weren't wearing uniforms or holding caps, it was immediately obvious that they were pilots. There was a powerful energy emanating from them, in front of which Julia immediately retreated and wanted to surrender. Look at that, Mickey. What a charming guide we have. Yes, Anthony, replied the other man. She's a class act. The two of them examined Julia so carefully that the new stewardess felt like a Slavic slave being led to market by a descendant of an Asiatic nation. Maybe that was their custom here. Julia tried to figure out how old Mickey and Anthony were. 40 at least. Okay, guys, don't hurt my girlfriend, Aurora said with a smile. She's mine now. Oh, we'd love to hurt you both, exclaimed Mickey. But we're married men, and that's a commitment. All right, let's get to work. It's a short flight. You won't even get tired. Well, we'll get to know each other better when we land, won't we? The pilots have gone into the cockpit. Security was high. You needed a special key to get in. But even that wasn't enough. The system had to recognize the crew member's face. After the navigator greeted them dryly, her partner continued her questioning. So what did he offer you? Aurora whispered. What did he ask you to do? Julia couldn't even remember what it was about. Oh, yes, they'd been discussing Paul. It made her a very strange proposal. But could she be surprised at that? He asked. Julia stretched out. Look, I can't say it out loud. I can't make it sound so ridiculous. Come on, say it. I demanded that you tell me. We've been friends for 10 minutes and you're already testing my nerves. Okay, Julia waved her hand. But if you tell anyone, it's the end of the friendship. He asked me to pose for him. Like a model. He's going to paint me in his mansion. Romantic, Aurora smiled. What's the big deal? Naked, the mother of many children added and blushed deeply. What do you mean naked? Asked her partner. Naked wants to pee on you? Strange, Paul had never been seen doing that before. I don't know whether to consider it harassment or not. Well, friend, let's get to work, shall we? The flight attendants had a lot to do. Not only greeting passengers, helping them to their seats, safely arranging their carry-on luggage, but also to check the expiration date of food and drinks, life jackets, make coffee for the captain, calm nervous passengers. We had to run in heels, so Julia's feet were sore from unaccustomed. While waiting for the journey to start, a briefing was held. Soon the loudspeaker announced takeoff. The passengers buckled up and the flight attendants were able to take their seats as well. The plane smoothly taxied onto the runway and began to accelerate. As the landing gear lifted off the ground, Julia's heart sank. At last she was free and independent. Of course, she would have liked to fly to Paris or London, but Sharm el-Sheikh was a good place to start. She pulled her phone out of her pocket and started recording clips. So, dear video diary, Julia said. I really don't want to do it, never dreamed of being a blogger, but duty. To get a job, I have to make a great video. Or at least the material for it. My movie will be shown on social networks, in a Telegram channel, maybe on TV. Julia sighed. She needed to speak her mind. It was hard at first, but then the words flowed easily. Julia made several videos at once, so that she could choose the best one. After all, her future depended on quality. If only she knew what would happen to her on this flight. and that her movie would indeed be watched and rewatched, but for a completely different purpose. 5 minutes into the flight, Julia had gotten so comfortable that she no longer considered her flight to be her first. Passengers had questions every minute, and she had to run back and forth. Aurora walked down one aisle and tried to do more work, but it soon became obvious that there was enough work for 2 people. Then she heard a voice she knew all too well. It was a first-class passenger who was outraged. He was shouting so loudly that he was overpowering the roar of the engines. Aurora hurried to calm him down. Julia lurked and watched them from a distance. "Hey, where's my whiskey, huh?" the man shouted. "Excuse me, you can order drinks after the command to unbuckle," replied her partner. "I'm sitting in first class. What are you doing?" He was indignant. "Come on, pour. Pour immediately." "Yes." A woman's voice joined him. "It's all paid for. Pour us some whiskey so we can relax." "Well, if you ask so," Aurora gave up. "I'll be right there." She went to the back room and poured 2 glasses of whiskey at the very bottom, added ice to it, rolled the drinks on a cart and set them down in front of the discerning customers. "Is that whiskey?" The man was indignant, emptying his glass in one gulp. "You bore worse than my first wife. Bring the whole bottle over here." "I apologize," Aurora said with a smile. "I'd already broken the rules. We don't serve whiskey by the bottle, only by the glass, 25 milliliters." "Then fill it up to the brim with your milliliters," the passenger demanded and slammed his fist into the armrest. The partner sighed again and went into the kitchen. Julia turned around, and just in time. There were at least 3 passengers waiting for her attention. The flight attendant immediately rushed over to them. Finally, the altitude was reached and the coveted signal to unbuckle the belts sounded. Soon the passengers would have to be fed. In the meantime, drinks must be served. The cart was in the kitchen to do this, and it was necessary to pass the first-class passengers. Covering her face with her hand, Julia rushed into the kitchen. There she arranged juices and sodas, regular and mineral water, plastic glasses. She sighed. She was lucky to be on the same board as this difficult passenger. Her partner came into the kitchen. She smiled at Julia and instantly filled her cart. "That's professionalism." "Listen, Aurora," Julia whispered. "I wouldn't want to serve that rude guy. You know, the one who demanded whiskey from you." "It's nothing." The blonde waved her hand. "There's one on every flight." "He didn't ask that much, did he?" "No, I can't go to first class," Julia insisted. "Why not?" her partner asked in surprise. "My husband is there," Julia explained. "Already ex-husband." Aurora thought for a moment. She looked at her watch, and it was time to serve drinks. "Did you guys have a rough breakup?" she asked. "Yes," replied her partner. "He left me with 3 kids. Literally threw me out on the street." "That's an amazing story," Aurora exhaled. "We'll discuss it tonight when we're done working." "My treat, okay." Her partner pushed the cart in front of her like a cover team. Julia followed. She glanced at her ex-husband, but he was looking the other way. And his mistress, motherfucker. Face stretched out like a flounder. Teeth sticking out big nose. What did he see in her? And he's gotten so fat. The first-class cabin was small, and they quickly got to the main mass of passengers. Here the mother of many children felt better. Only 5 hours, Julia thought. He's out there in first class, flying alone. Well, with his estranged girlfriend. I guess I can hold out. Besides, there's a lot of work to do here. So the drinks went well. Eden didn't see her. She had to go to the kitchen at least once more to get lunchboxes, and another time to take away the used utensils, and another, and another. The mother of many children thought Evan really needed to be issued a bottle of whiskey to get him drunk so he could fall into a deep sleep. As the new stewardess was rolling the drink cart, someone called out to her. "Julia, Julia, come here." She heard a voice from first class, and it wasn't a man's voice. The new stewardess went into the back room. But the strange thing was that there was already a man there, and not someone who could be here legally. She scrutinized the passenger, tall, a little full, with a good-natured face. A neat beard adorned his radiant face. "Excuse me," the man said, intercepting her gaze. "I'm looking for the restroom." "It's over there," Julia shrugged and pointed behind her back. "And you were going to the cockpit." "That's my navigator gone wrong," said the passenger and smiled broadly. The new stewardess could not imagine how this handsome man could be so wrong. After all, they had given the direction to the restroom at the very beginning, right after landing. True, the traveler was charming. He smiled and laughed beautifully. The flight attendant involuntarily laughed herself. "We must calibrate the navigator," Julia said, "to support him. Otherwise, you could make another mistake. Like choosing a life partner, for example." "Again, I apologize," the man added. "By the way, I've seen you recording things on your phone. It's like you're blogging." "That's right," Julia glowed. "There'll be a whole movie. If you're a frequent flyer on the Strat flight, you'll definitely see it. On the corporate website, on the Telegram channel." "Oh, it's my favorite company." The passenger clapped his hands. "Can I take a picture with you?" He took a huge phone out of his pocket, which she had never seen before. It looked solid and expensive. He gallantly took her by the elbow and then embraced her. Aurora had never seen such a camera on a phone before. It felt like he was literally scanning her. "Cheese, there you go." "Oh, thank you. You've been very helpful," the man said and kissed her hand gallantly. "You had to go to the bathroom," Julia reminded him. "Yes, I did, but I dare not say such words in front of a lady," nodded the passenger and went away in the opposite direction from the cockpit. In the kitchen, she quickly loaded the lunchboxes onto the cart. It was 20 minutes until lunch. Aurora hadn't come up yet, but Julia decided to waste no time. When she heard the woman's voice, she simply didn't turn around. Maybe Yvonne wouldn't notice her, but her plans were not to be. As soon as the stewardess stepped out from behind the screen, she immediately felt the stare of two pairs of drunken eyes. "I told you she," shrieked the lady, pointing her finger at Julia. "She, your Megara. Hey, you divorcee," she called out. "Come here quick." The way was still past the ex-husband and his mistress. Even if Julia wanted to, she couldn't get past them. So the mother of many children dutifully approached the man who, if not broke her life to the ground, was trying very hard. Evan was a little discouraged, but held himself well. "Oh, mother of my children," he said. "By the way, did I tell you I got married again?" "Here, meet her." But he had no time to say the name, because he was immediately interrupted by his companion. She was dressed strangely, a black skirt covered with some shining leaves, a yellow vest, a silk scarf. Her hands and fingers were covered with jewelry. I think she'd seen this face on social media before. Right, Evan's mistress. And now she's his lawfully wedded wife. She looked really good in the retouched photos, though. Much better than she looked in real life. "We got married, and now we're going on a cruise. First Egypt, then Israel, then South Africa. Then it told me so many things about you," the woman said. "What a disgusting and untalented mother you are. And how you only know one role-playing game in bed. Linenists and logs. And you had to put up with all that for so many years." "That's it," Julia exhaled. "Nice to meet you. And yes, we'll do more tests," she added. "We'll find out who really is the father of these 3 cute kids. I heard that you've fallen for my man's goodies. Well, you know it's not going to work. Don't you dare go to court or I'll put a curse on you." "I have no time to talk to you," said the mother of many children. "I'm at work, in case you haven't noticed." "Oh, right." Ivan slapped himself on the leg. "As soon as we get downstairs, we'll file a complaint against her. The big one. Get her fired. That's a great idea." Overwhelmed by these words, Julia didn't even pay attention to the fact that the strange passenger had passed her. He was once again moving in the opposite direction from the restroom. When he saw the flight attendant, he smiled radiantly and winked at her. Julia thought she should try to talk Evan out of complaining. She might actually get fired. Julia, I wonder where you're going on vacation, Evan said, emptying his whiskey glass. And where are my backbenchers? And then I realized that you've abandoned the children. How dare you? That's what the witch said, and we're taking the kids away from her. Not for ourselves, of course, but for an orphanage. It was getting harder and harder to stay calm. But in her unhappy marriage to Evan, the woman had developed an immunity to any abuse. She looked at her ex-husband's new wife and said, "You look so unusual. You must have a creative profession, an artist or a designer." "I'm a priestess," said the lady, clearly flattered by the attention. "I do rituals, untie knots, but nothing will help you." "Dear passengers," there was a voice behind them. The silent navigator approached them. "You must have seen the conflict on the video. I'm letting you know we're on tape. As soon as we get off at Sharm el-Sheikh Airport, I will call the police." "What do you mean?" Evan asked. "It's my ex-girlfriend. I love her if I want to. I'll stab her if I want to." "That's what I'm talking about," the navigator exclaimed. "Stop it now or I'll cuff you. You'll be immobilized for the rest of the flight." Evan drew in a lungful of air to respond. His companion began making strange hand motions, as if she were casting magic. But the dramatic denouement was pushed back by an equally strange twist. A signal sounded. The pilot wanted to address the passengers and staff by speakerphone. What the male voice said made Julia, Evan, and his priestess go cold with horror. So much so that the separated woman squealed with fear. Oliver was frankly bored. All around him were happy families and couples on vacation in Egypt. He looked into their faces and tried to take in the positivity of others. But it wasn't working. During his studies, Oliver had envisioned his career as an agent a little differently. He thought he would perform risky operations, walk on a razor blade, save the world from evil. Alas, he spoke English and German poorly, was a terrible shot, unable to gain confidence and generate bright ideas. Evil, as it turns out, does not exist at all. All agents are bored, but some are a little luckier. But he, Oliver, is not lucky at all. That's why, right after graduation, the man spent 5 years secretly guarding government facilities under the guise of a janitor, an electrician, or a visitor. What could be more boring than constantly walking along the same routes in places where nothing ever happens? Then there was a light at the end of the tunnel. Oliver remembered the day well. So Oliver, the big boss, called him into his office. "You've worked hard and earned a promotion. Now you will guard people in a big way, but with business trips. Fly around, see the world. Do you agree?" "Of course," Oliver exclaimed. How could I miss such a chance? We made a deal, signed a secret contract. Did he, an agent with 5 years of experience, know that now he would be flying on airplanes 6 days a week, protecting passengers from phantom terrorists? He assumed. The hardest part is posing as a vacationing passenger. Oliver's tense face literally scared other people away. You can't drink alcohol. No reading books or watching movies. Every hour, Oliver must make his rounds discreetly, under the guise of a bored passenger. To first class, to the restroom and back, watching the faces of the other travelers. In 3 years of such labor, even impressionable women have complained about it. "We have a maniac on board," they often said. "He has already gotten up 3 times and passed me by. Protect me." The only thing worse than this boredom is, "Ladies and gentlemen," a handsome man's voice came over the speakerphone, "please remain calm. Our plane has been hijacked. Once again, for those in the tank, the plane has been hijacked. Both pilots are bound and in the cockpit. I've tranquilized each of them. I'm the only one with the antidote. Autopilot reprogrammed, transporter disabled. We're taking a different route, but you need to stay calm. I have an aide on board, and if I get hurt, he'll blow up the whole ship. Don't act like heroes, and then everyone will survive." There was silence. A wave of terror ran through the airplane. The agent pulled out his cell phone to send a distress signal. The terrorist must have thoughtfully disconnected the connection. Checked the gun. It was still there. According to the instructions, the ammunition was supposed to be stored separately, and now it was in his carry-on bag. Slowly, trying not to attract attention, the agent got up and took out the ammunition. Put it in his pocket. Then he sat back down and realized he couldn't move. For a few minutes, Oliver did breathing exercises to deal with the excitement, and hoped that it was all a hoax, and that in reality the plane hadn't been hijacked. But as time went on, it was like he was stuck in his seat, and prayed he'd come back from the flight alive. The navigator, Aurora Julia, her ex-husband, and his lady looked at each other in bewilderment. Each of them had heard the message, but all of them equally thought such a thing impossible. The boorish man was the first to speak. "Is this a joke?" Ivan asked, looking at his ex-wife. "A joke? I don't know," she whispered. "I'll ask the senior officer." And the captain. "Yermino," the ex-husband shrieked. "You're a stewardess like your mother. Worthless. Worthless." How would I know who hijacked the plane? Julia wondered. Her heart filled with hatred. "You think they consulted me? You're the one who attracts all the bad luck." Evan insisted. "I'm sure the terrorist in charge has had you in his pants for years." "I'm not a terrorist," came a voice behind me. Julia turned around. A man was approaching them from the side of the cabin, the same passenger in whom it was impossible to suspect a criminal. He was smiling radiantly, his face even more pleased than it had been 10 minutes ago. He was smiling radiantly, his face even happier than it had been 10 minutes ago. "I beg your pardon," Julia said. "I overheard your conversation and explained. Please call me Frank. I'm the one who hijacked the plane. Of course, there's room for emotion in every case, but you shouldn't call me a terrorist. It's unseemly." "Oh, it's you?" Evan said defiantly, rising. The whiskey had already gotten to his head. "You're the one who ruined my wedding cruise. First her, then you. I'll have you right now." "Sit down, Evan, sit down," Julia said. The hot tourist companion also grabbed his arm. "What women do you have?" Frank smiled and lifted the hem of his jacket. A pistol was holstered at chest level. Juliet had never seen a gun in person before, but she thought it was gigantic. "If it weren't for them, I'd have put an extra hole in your brainless head by now." Evan turned pale and immediately collapsed in his chair. The horror of what was happening began to dawn on him. His lips turned blue and his tongue began to slur. I mean, the man whispered. "Are you real? You that captured us all?" Of course, Frank nodded. The first part of the operation went brilliantly, like a textbook. We'll see what happens next. But that doesn't give you the right to call me a terrorist, mind you. I'll forgive you for the first time. But if you ever call me a bad word again, or just look at me sideways, I'll never let you down." Ivan was silent. He looked at his companion and then at his ex-wife, as if searching for support. Though the situation was threatening, Julia felt a kind of satisfaction. So that was how it was. There were always bigger fish to fry. "So," said Frank, turning to the young guide, "I liked you right away, and so I'm going to ask you for your help." Julia is stretched out. "I need to consult with the older woman." "There she is." "Aurora, why don't you speak?" But it was as if the older woman had lost her tongue. She looked from her partner to Frank and back again. Then she took the priestess's whiskey glass and emptied it. "Oh, it's nothing." The invader waved his hand. "I don't think she'll mind. You see, she's a little stressed. Doctors would say it's counterproductive to drink alcohol in a situation like this. But I'm not a doctor. So, dear Julia, we'll work with you. By the way, I've come up with a nice nickname for you, number one." "How does that sound?" "Lovely," whispered the stewardess. "Number one, because you're the best." "I can see that right away," Frank explained. "Now if you need to take the 2 large baskets over there, Put them on your beautiful cart and walk through the cabin collecting the phones. And also inform every passenger that standing up is forbidden. Punishment. Well, tell them they won't like the punishment. Why collect the phones? Julia wondered. No need for questions, dear. Take away all cell phones, tablets, and other gadgets, said the criminal. Let's start right now. Here, this nice couple of first-class travelers will put their handsets. That's it, yes. Tell the others not to worry. We'll bring them back when our trip is over. I'll be waiting there. Frank waved toward the service section of the plane, between the cockpit and the first-class cabin. Pushing the cart in front of her, Julia felt disgusted. Her whole life was flying before her eyes. Her first flight, and immediately such a nightmare. Could it be a dream? No, it couldn't be. Who would her children be left with now? It's not for nothing that disgusting woman, the head of the personnel department, discouraged her. She should have listened. She could have worked as a clerk at the clinic, earned her pennies. Still better than to give her soul to God at the age of 25. Say, an elderly passenger asked. It's not a joke, not a joke. Unfortunately, no, Julia replied, trying to remain calm. Let's just avoid panic. I've been told to collect the phones. How dare you? Some man shouted. I paid a lot of money for the ticket, and I'm supposed to get a cell phone. Please don't worry, said the stewardess. We'll return everything after the end of the flight. That's the requirement. The requirement. Julia was silent, trying to find the right word. Terrorist? Invader? Criminal? Such definitions would only frighten this crowd. No, there had to be a neutral word. That is the demand of the man who took command of our ship, she said. He said he would punish the disgruntled in the worst possible way. The man who had been yelling at her a moment ago suddenly calmed down. He held out his cell phone. At some point, the baskets became heavy with machinery. She rolled them to the utility room, pulled back the screen door on the recliner was Frank. He was doing something on his laptop, one hand clutching his giant pistol. The man waved nonchalantly toward the table. Julia began laying out phones and tablets there. Frank stepped away from the laptop, closing it. Like a magician, he quickly separated the smartphones from the tablets. Made 5 stacks of the phones. Then he took another close look at the phones and counted them. These manipulations seemed to go on for ages. Julia's legs began to whine, and very badly. Okay, Frank said. There are 55 passengers and crew members. 2 pilots I knocked out. I took the navigator's cell phone away. There are 53 handsets. There's 2 missing. I didn't put it down, Julia said. It slipped my mind. I remember, the invader smiled. You're making a movie. Why did you stop, by the way? Why don't you make a movie right now? But you told me to give up my cell phones, said the stewardess. You're allowed to keep them, Frank waved his hand. Come on, make a video right now. Please. Julia sighed. She took out her phone, turned on the camera, and said in a trembling voice, Dear Video Diary, we've had a certain complication. There's been a change of authority on the airplane. I am now following the instructions of one gentleman. Frank, shouted the full brunette. My name is Frank. Number 1, go on. Now, said Julia, we are now collecting cell phones from passengers and crew members. One of them didn't listen to me. Yes, Frank put in. I wonder who didn't hand over the phone. That person will have to pay for his stubbornness. Julia remembered another episode of her failed marriage. It was getting close to divorce. She didn't know anything specific about the mistress yet, but she had a hunch. Evan began to spend nights at home infrequently, not every day, and on those nights he demanded intimacy, though Julia was disgusted by his touch, his breath, his appearance. Where's my money? Evan shrieked Saturday morning, running into their bedroom with his wallet. I'm $50,000 missing. I have no idea, Julia replied. Why would I suddenly go through your wallet? Come on, let's go make breakfast for the kids. Kids, the ex-husband yelled. Get them in the kitchen. We're going to explain to them that it's wrong to take other people's stuff. Evan, the woman said, please calm down. You're scaring me. I'm scaring you? Evan was boiling. You've never earned a dime in your life. You're sitting on my ass. I'm sure you moved them somewhere, Julia said calmly. But inside she was getting angry at the negligent man. I never even thought of taking your money. You buy everything yourself, don't you? They gathered in the large living room kitchen. In the first year of their married life, her husband had bought a gigantic 5-room apartment. He explained his choice by the fact that he wanted many children. And now the square meters were filled with the stomping of little feet, but the paternal instincts of the man did not hurry to wake up. Kids, he said, I've gathered you all for the reason that tonight, Mommy stole $50,000 from me. Elizabeth, the oldest, looked at her parents in horror. The boys didn't seem to understand anything. Now we're all going to look for them together, Evan continued. Let's get started. Julia waved her hand and started to prepare breakfast. Pasta for the boys, buckwheat porridge for Elizabeth. She didn't feel hungry herself, and after her husband's prank, she just wanted to lie on the bed, wrap her arms around herself and sleep. When the water was already boiling and the buckwheat was washed, she heard Elizabeth shout. Found, pronounced the girl. Not remembering herself, Julia rushed into her daughter's room. She was pointing at the dollhouse. In one of the toy cabinets were bills. Evan was already standing in the doorway, too pleased with himself. Well, get it out, he demanded of his daughter. The girl took out the mummy $5,000 bills. Carefully laid them out on the floor. The crime is solved, Evan said solemnly. What will be the punishment? Daddy, I'm sorry, Mom. Elizabeth said, it was an accident. Right, Mom? I had nothing to do with that money. Julia cut Julia off. If I had really stolen it, I would have hidden it better. Like in my underwear. How dare you say that in front of my children? The ex-husband shouted in an impersonation. So, the punishment is eviction. I'll give you 1 month. But Julia's insides shattered. What about our children? You're at home much at night. You have an apartment, Evan insisted. You have a whole house. That's where the 4 of you will move. I'll get transportation, and I'll move everything in the best way possible. You'll know how to steal my money. 30 minutes had passed since the capture of the ship, and Oliver's ability to think and act soberly had not returned. The terrorist was alone. The agent could easily disarm him or even shoot him. Theoretically. In practice, there were several obstacles. First of all, this maniac claimed that the ship was booby-trapped. We can't rule that out. Secondly, you could have an accomplice on board, and more than one. Thirdly, it was necessary to remove the criminal carefully, so as not to damage the hull. Oliver suddenly realized that he was neither mentally nor physically ready to kill. He watched the stewardess, a young blonde who was defiantly drinking whiskey straight from the bottle. It's all gone, she shouted. We're all going to die. God, I don't want to die young. I have so much more to do. The passengers began to murmur, and impressionable women even cried. A man in a navigator's tunic approached the stewardess. He gently, even tenderly, took the flight attendant under his arms, but she did not appreciate his concern. No, she shrieked. Don't try to calm me down. I should have foreseen it, felt it. God, I don't want to die young. Oliver had the same thoughts in his head. The agent realized he was going to die, but unlike the other passengers, he could influence the course of his fate. He needed a plan. Oliver furtively glanced at the phone, still no connection. How could he send a distress signal? So, need to figure out what to do next. Work out. I beg your pardon, he heard a woman's voice that snapped him out of his oblivion. Give me your phone. Oliver jerked like a thunderclap. The stewardess. The agent looked at her, clutching the smartphone in his hand. What to do? A According to the manual, he wasn't supposed to give the device to anyone. However, it was also supposed to be safely hidden and only taken out when no one could see it. "It's not mine," Oliver said absently. "It's not mine." "Please," the woman asked in a whisper, "give it to me nicely. It's weird. I don't know what he'll do to you." Julia looked at the stubborn passenger with surprise. He's certainly curious, if not unique. He sat alone at the very end of the half-empty cabin. He seemed to be flying for a vacation, but he wore pants, shoes, and a jacket. Didn't drink any drinks or eat any food. Did not read a book, watch a movie, or listen to music. "Dear," said Oliver, "please don't talk about my phone. I'll say this all." It seemed that the limit of surprises for today is exhausted, but Ksushina's eyes opened wide again. Who was this strange passenger, and how was he going to save them? The still-gun flight attendant looked at how the navigator is trying to calm the drunken Aurora, and she became uncomfortable. "So we need to get the phone away from this stubborn man before Frank does something stupid." "I'm the one apologizing," Julia said firmly. "The invader gave me an order. He said there would be trouble for everyone if I didn't comply." "You don't want us to crash, do you?" I don't. The man nodded. "But you have to trust me. I can save us all. But to do that, I just need the phone to communicate." "What's that for?" The conductor was surprised. "Who are you going to contact?" "The sender," Oliver shrugged. "There's no time to explain. You have to convince the terrorist that you took the phone from me." "But he'll check," Julia almost shouted. "Tell him you threw it away," the passenger said. "Make something up. Please. Without this phone, we'll lose all hope of rescue." The conductor thought for a moment. This man has definitely lost his mind. He thinks he's in touch with some kind of center. At first, Julia thought the passenger was Frank's accomplice. But no, it's not likely. He would have known that one phone would be missing. "Passenger," Julia pleaded, "for the last time, please use the phone back nicely. I think this invader is already out there." Oliver, absorbed in the dialogue, lost all focus. He couldn't beat over the fact that the unthinkable had happened on his watch. The plane had been hijacked. The agent thought that this conductor should be told the truth, and then she would definitely become his ally. "You see," said Oliver, "I'm a sky marshal." "What?" The stewardess almost screamed. "Stop talking nonsense. I won't cheat Frank for you. I'm a mother of many children. And he's got a gun, I've seen it." "Describe it," demanded the sky marshal, taking a small notebook and pen from his pocket. "Describe what the gun looks like. I'll mark it." Julia was literally speechless with indignation. What is it with these men? Have they lost the ability to think? One leaves her with 3 kids and flies off on vacation with his mistress. Another asks her to pose nude for him. The third hijacks an airplane. And the fourth asks to describe a gun. "Stop this at once," the conductor demanded. "I will go to the kidnapper of the ship right now and tell him everything." "Don't you dare," whispered Oliver angrily. "I'm in command here, and I order you to describe the weapons to me. And see yourself naturally, so that no one suspects anything." Then the conductor saw something strange. The same terrorist was sneaking down the second aisle, crouching low to the floor. He did it so naturally that the passengers did not even pay attention to him. The mother of many children thought that the madman should be warned, but was confused. The words stuck in her throat. Frank, with a grace surprising for his physique, crept up behind her. He did something that made Julia's eyes water with horror. "Bingo!" Frank exclaimed. "Thanks for your help, number 1. "Darling, roll the cart?" asked the invader, as if nothing unusual had happened. To a general murmur, Julia rushed into the back room and took the lunches off the cart. The passengers were still hungry, but no one made a scandal about it. The conductor rolled the empty cart back to the last row of seats. "Good girl," Frank complimented her. You killed him," Julia whispered. Tears sprang from her eyes. The horror of what had happened into her slowly, like intoxication. "What makes you think that?" the airplane hijacker asked picturesquely. He put the air marshal's body on the floor, pulled back his jacket, and pulled out a pistol. The guide's eyes grew even wider. Tucking the weapon behind his belt, the terrorist lifted the lid of the luggage compartment, rummaged through some things, and took out a clip of ammunition. Put it in his pocket. Spare, why aren't you talking, number one? Frank asked, smiling at the stewardess. I'm trying to find out why you think I killed that cop. I saw you stab him with a knife, whispered Julia. Everybody saw you. Some woman shouted from her seat. A live man stabbed in the back. Frank paid no attention to this cry of despair. He looked at his chief hostage, who was forced to obey his orders, extracted a belt from the pants of the defeated marshal, and bound his hands in a cunning manner. He tested the strength and clucked his tongue in satisfaction. If I killed him, then why am I tying him up, he asked. Come on, help me get this body onto the cart. The two of them lifted the unfortunate Oliver and lowered him carelessly onto the gurney. If he had been conscious, he would have groaned in pain. I saw the knife, Julia said, wiping away her tears. In your hands, a long one. This? Frank asked in a whisper, pulling a device out of his pocket. It's not a knife. It's a taser stylized to look like a knife. There's about 100 more charges in here to knock everybody out. Come on. Tell passengers everything's okay. I can't scream, the stewardess whispered. Then take a portable microphone and headphones, shrugged the invader. Over there. By the way, give me your cell phone for a second. He pointed to a drawer at the end of the cabin. The woman pulled a microphone from there, turned it on. The device quickly connected to the internal network. The terrorist took her cell phone and began recording a clip. With difficulty pulling herself together, Julia said loudly, Dear passengers, and video diary, prompted Frank with a smile, recording her statement. And the video diary, Julia corrected herself. One of the passengers refused to hand over his cell phone. In addition, he was carrying a gun. He was immobilized by Mr. Frank. Please remain calm. There was a murmur and a buzz around the plane. Impressionable women began to scream. The plane's kidnapper immediately moved the camera over there, zoomed in. Yes, the stewardess continued. I asked him to give me the phone, and he threatened. You see, our hijacker had no other choice. Is he alive? Someone asked in horror. Yes, Julia nodded. I just saw him breathing, just immobilized. Please, let's honor every request of our new leader. The attendant pressed the button twice. The earpiece went off. Frank just glowed. He held out her cell phone, took a bottle of Coca-Cola from the bottom shelf of the gurney that had been forgotten there, opened it, and took a huge gulp. What a beautiful drinker he was. He should be advertising drinks. Roll, the criminal ordered, pointing at the cart. I'll walk behind and give you moral support. This air marshal was really heavy. The strain and stress made the conductor all sweaty. Frank walked behind, holding a bottle of Coke in his left hand and his huge pistol in his right. The man's actions did not match his affable appearance. He was nodding to the passengers and making excuses for having to immobilize one of them. Can you believe it? He said. I wanted to shoot. Well, I can't shoot. It's nothing, don't worry. Hello. It's all right. Yes, we'll be there soon. We'll be there soon. Enjoy your trip, yeah. That ride to the end of the cabin seemed endless to Julia. Twice Oliver's leg fell sideways and she had to correct him, so he didn't bang against the seats and the wall. The third time, she let it go. It didn't feel anything. Keep rolling, number one, Frank ordered when they reached the back room. All right, now stand back. The conductor was literally sweating from the exertion. She became short of breath and took a few seconds to regain consciousness. The fear of death had dulled somewhat, and now she believed that this crazy adventure could end well, and that she would return to her babies safe and sound. How did you get into the cabin? Julia asked, catching her breath. I have a card. Frank showed him and actually took it out of his pocket. Then he took out his huge cell phone, unlocked the screen, swiped the card across the lock, and put the smartphone in front of his face. The diode lit up green. He was indeed able to enter the cabin. Before the door closed, Julia saw the two pilots. They were sitting in their seats, turned around to face each other. The head of each of them had fallen on his chest. The conductor wanted to examine how they managed to stay in that position, but the door closed. Time dragged on slowly. Finally, the indicator light on the lock turned green again. "Damn it!" shouted Frank, stepping outside. "You brainless sheep. Number one, can you believe me? Can you?" "I don't know," Julia whispered. She tried to peer over the invader's shoulder to see the pilots, but he quickly covered the door. "Those negotiators, damn them, don't believe me," shouted Frank. In the next second, it was as if the criminal had switched gears. The wrinkles on his face smoothed out and a smile appeared. "It's all right. We'll prove to them that I'm serious. I'm a serious man. They look for words around. Now, number one, I'll meet you in the next 20 minutes. You in your impeccable composure." "I'm sorry," Julia whispered. "Whose blood are you going to spill?" "Patience, my dear, you'll soon see for yourself. It won't be long now." "There, come in," Frank said gallantly, pulling back the curtain. They went out into the parlor. The ex-husband did not utter a word, and when he saw the invader, he looked defiantly out of the porthole. His priestess, however, looked at Julia with eyes full of hatred. "Tell me, please," she shouted. "When will we be fed?" "I'm starving." "Unfortunately, there are only 2 stewardesses on board," Frank said in a deliberately mournful voice. "One of them is drunk right now and claims we all have only a few hours to live. And the other one is right here, helping me. No one can feed you, I'm sorry to say." "What am I supposed to do?" the priestess asked and started making strange movements with her hands. It looked funny, as if she was warding off invisible mosquitoes or flies. "Nothing to eat?" with faint concern asked the airplane hijacker. "Well then, you can always suck on something. At least for now." Evan's lady literally turned brown with indignation. Julia laughed, but held back. "And what are you, Silent?" the priestess asked her beau. "Well, yes," Evan stretched out. "You heard that this gentleman gave me a last warning. I don't want to die." "Your priestess has just been insulted, and you don't want to die," she shrieked. "How dared you?" "Wait, don't find out yet," Frank said. He tore down the 2 curtains that were blocking the passage between first and second grade. This madman was clearly not lacking in strength. Julia looked with a mixture of horror and admiration at the tattered curtains, trying to figure out what kind of man had chained her to them. "I'll use this if you don't mind, number one," the invader asked. Frank had requisitioned a wireless microphone with an earpiece, the same one Julia had used. The crew need this device to communicate with each other and to address the passengers. It's rarely used, after all the important information is usually given by the ship's captain. The invader chose a place where he could be seen by everyone in the aisle between first and second class. "Ladies and gentlemen, may I have your attention, please, Frank? Can everyone hear me? Show of hands if you can't hear me. All right. Now, I've contacted the government and voiced my demand. It's strictly financial, no politics. Well, in response, I was rudely humiliated and called the most unpleasant of names. Can you imagine? A woman screamed from her seat, 'So let us go, we want to live.' Oh, my dear, that's what I'm doing now," smiled Frank. "I'd love to let half the passengers go, but look out the window. We're flying over the Mediterranean. If I let you go, no one will pick up a bone. But it's a good idea, because my demands have been rejected so bluntly, I must act. I thought it was time to demonstrate my seriousness. What do you say, dearie? Why don't I let one of the passengers go?" There was silence again. The passenger who had called for his release hid behind one of the seats. Fear was physically felt in the cabin. Julia felt her feet grow cold. What is this madman up to? "Need a victim," Frank continued. Yes, yes, one small sacrifice. To make sure that everyone knows I'm serious in heaven and on earth. Maybe some of our traveling companions would like to volunteer. There was a murmur in the ranks. There was loud female crying and wailing, just like in the movies. Julia continued to stand, but it was getting harder and harder for her to stay on her feet. He won't hurt me, thought the mother of many children. I'm helping him, but Aurora might. Her partner was asleep on the chair after drinking alcohol. Her uniform cap had fallen off her head and lay beside her, but Frank didn't seem to pay any attention to her. He didn't look at the passengers either, just stared at one point. So as not to stir up social hatred, the invader continued. I have decided to select the person who is the least to be pitied. We have only 2 travelers in first class. Since I don't hurt women as a matter of principle, that leaves only him. That's the rude one. Frank gestured at Julia's ex-husband. In the moment, she felt both gloating and satisfaction. Well, now he's going to get it for all the wrongs he's done. Karma. But after a second, she shook the thought away. He's the father of her children, her ex-husband. They lived together for so many years. He may not have been perfect, but sometimes he tried. Yes, he'd caused her a lot of pain and hurt, but he didn't deserve to die like this. Don't you dare, Ian shouted. I'm a father of many children. You'll leave my little blood children without a piece of bread. And where are the children? Frank asked with a smile, pulling out his gun. They're at home, Ethan answered, swallowing nervously. What? A family vacation. The invader clarified again, Leslie pointing the barrel at the priestess. She slumped into the chair and covered her face with her hands. You left your children with your mother-in-law, and now you're on vacation. Ethan blurted. He glanced at Julia every now and then, as if assessing whether he should lie. Ethan was not a stupid man, but rather insolent, greedy, and angry. Even in this situation, he thought there was a way out. Deceive him, beg him, offer him another passenger. But as he pondered feverishly, I have nothing to do with this male dog and his brood, the priestess said fearfully. I consider my marriage to this man a mistake. Mercury in retrograde must have sent me the wrong sign that day. Do with him as you see fit. Just leave me out of it. The invader gave me another charming smile and a thumbs up, like he was praising a woman for her cowardice. Well, Frank spoke into the microphone. The victim has been found. If anyone objects, tell me now. Just give me an argument. And the answer was. Oliver came to his senses. At first, he thought the plane was going down into the abyss. Then he realized he was just dizzy, and the cart he was lying on had forgotten to lock its wheels. It rolled back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. The whole body was aching terribly. Although consciousness returned to the air marshal, his arms and legs refused to obey him. But there was a calmness, a silent realization that everything would end safely. Oliver began to try to regain control of his limbs. He moved his fingers first, slowly, gradually, then his hands. Here's the first problem. Arms bent behind his back and bound, then the feet. That's good. He tried to get up, but he didn't have the strength. So he just twisted out of the cart and collapsed to the floor. Face bumped into the carpeting. That's it. That's it. Oliver whispered, trying to get to his knees. On the 3rd or 4th try, he succeeded. The strongest non-lethal weapon must have been used against him. But he was lucky. His excellent health had made the attack less powerful than the attacker had hoped. How long had he been out? The cockpit clock was counting down the flight time. 2 hours and 31 minutes, so he was only out for an hour. So what's next? Oliver sat down on the floor and tried to run his hands under him. He couldn't get his hands under him. They were tied too high. Then he began to feel the knots. The air marshal looked down and realized that the bored invader had requisitioned his belt. This accessory only looked expensive. In reality, it was cheap leather and therefore stretched, but with difficulty. Oliver began pulling his arms to the sides, lifting his hands up and down. After a few minutes, the belt gave way, and he managed to free himself. Victory. Excellent, the agent said. Even better than I could have expected. He wanted to rush to the door, but all that he could do was walk. It could be locked from the inside so that no one would open it. Staggering, he did it. Now what? Sound the alarm, Oliver thought. Turn on the transporter. No, this isn't the time. We need to lay low. He realized that he didn't have to show the whole crew and that pompous fat man his capabilities right now. It would be enough to bring one of the pilots to his senses, and for them to land the plane quickly and carefully. They can sometimes do that without any authorization or warning. Both pilots were in their seats. The hands of each of them were tied to the handles. Their bodies were fastened to the backrests with long straps. Oliver had seen the men several times before. Those must have been aware of his status, but never even said hello. Hello, men, Oliver said, surprised at his own voice. It was dry, dead. He must not have come to his senses yet. The pilots showed no signs of life. Both one and the other had yellow skin on their faces. With fear bordering on despair, the air marshal put his finger on the pilot's neck. If he doesn't have a pulse, they're dead. No one can land the plane. It's only in the movies that even a stewardess can handle such a difficult task. Oliver tensed up, trying to see if the pilot had a pulse or not. Come with me, if you don't mind, Frank said to Julia, and get up and walk too. Where are we going? Yvonne asked dully. To the tail of the plane, said the invader. There's a small compartment there. Come on, don't make me kill you right here in front of this wonderful audience. People are on vacation, they don't deserve such a spectacle. Yeah, some woman shouted. They don't deserve it. Kill him where no one can hear or see him, please. But you don't judge, the terrorist winked. The woman remained silent the very case when it meant unconditional consent. The strange procession went to the tail. Julia walked in front, followed by her ex-husband and then Frank. Here the mother of many children did not even enter. Behind was the baggage compartment, but there was no way out of the cabin. The flight attendant had no business in such places, so she had no idea of their existence. Together they entered a room. It was cooler than the cabin, and the hum of the engines was louder. Adam wrapped his arms around himself and began to shiver. Unlock it, the invader nonchalantly pointed to a hatch in the floor. Julia began to dig into her memory. Yes, she had studied something like that while studying for the exam. An emergency exit. Did it really exist? She thought it was nothing more than a prank. I can't, the girl said. I don't have the authority. Nonsense, Frank waved his hand. One of the crew has a special key. Look in your vest pocket. Julia slipped her hand in and was surprised to find an object she hadn't even realized was in her uniform. A small key. She took it out and inserted it into some sort of keyhole. There was no need to turn it, though. There was a click. The handle appeared on the surface of the hatch. The flight attendant looked at it thoughtfully. Love, you're going to do this? Yvonne asked in a pained tone. I'm the father of your children. So do you two know each other? Frank asked with a smile. Or are you just improvising? We know each other, Julia sighed. He left me, with those same 3 blood babies he was talking about. Don't say that, please, Evan said. I didn't leave him. I left him temporarily. But I'll come back, I swear. I'll come back and I'll take care of the kids. And you, I'll take you to the movies, okay? Shut up, said the conductor. You'd better buy Max a new jacket and Elizabeth some boots. I pay alimony, the hostage shouted. My books are clean. You're supposed to be the one buying it for them. I don't know what to spend the money on. Maybe on yourself or on your men. I have to be sure you know. All you got to do was ask me. I was kidding about the kneeling. I'm sure you've long since forgiven that nice little prank about stealing the money, haven't you? Okay, I put the key in. Now what? The stewardess asked. I can't listen to this whining anymore. Frank smiled and raised the palm of his left hand. In his right hand, he continued to clutch his huge pistol. "It's a passageway to another life," the criminal announced, "or death. All right, everybody ready?" What happened in the next instant changed the life of the unfortunate mother of many children forever. The pilots were breathing, but weakly. He unbuckled all the straps and put them on the floor. He took off his boots and undid the buttons of their shirts. Checked his heartbeat. Consciousness was clearly depressed, but by what? This terrorist probably used a tranquilizer. Unfortunately, without knowing the composition, it was difficult to find an antidote. But we'd have to find the answer by trial and error. There was a first aid kit in the cockpit. Oliver rushed to it, took it out, checked its contents. The last time he'd taken a course in medicine was about 3 years ago. He'd never been interested in that area of knowledge, so he'd missed many of the lectures. But he remembered one thing for sure. In a situation like this, an adrenaline shot straight to the heart would help. "Hold on," Oliver said, and wiped the sweat from his forehead. Slowly, he regained control of his limbs and fingers. It must have been a simple tranquilizer to bring him back to consciousness so quickly. Or he got a small dose. Well, there are 2 pilots, so he has a chance to test his theory. He found a vial of adrenaline in the first aid kit. He could, of course, calculate the mass of the pilot, calculate the amount of the substance needed, but that would give him nothing. He took a syringe, screwed a long needle into it. I tried for a long time to fill it. Then I remembered the necessary sequence of actions. I took off the long needle, screwed on the short one, filled the syringe with the drug, blew out the air trapped in the syringe. He unbuttoned the shirt on the pilot's chest, who seemed larger to him. He must have a big heart, you couldn't miss it. "Oh God," Oliver whispered. "What am I in for?" He remembered a picture from a general anatomy course, that the heart was not on the left side, but rather in the center, and that the lungs were on either side of it. If he punctured one of them. No, it was better not to think about it. He brought up a syringe of adrenaline, took aim and jabbed it into the pilot's chest, pressed the valve, squeezing the contents out completely. Damn, I forgot to treat the wound, Oliver thought. Well, if they were destined to crash, this man certainly wouldn't die of blood poisoning. From there, seconds seemed like an eternity to the air marshal. At first, nothing happened, but suddenly the pilot's eyes opened, too abruptly. He raised his hand and struck Oliver with such a deafening blow that he collapsed to the floor. "Why? Why did you do that?" Julia asked. Now she could get a better look at the strange weapon. It did resemble a knife, but it probably couldn't penetrate too deeply. "Why?" Frank was surprised. "Now, if you're going to record a video, you're going to send it to these assholes, along with everything you recorded earlier. Let me help you. Dear video diary." "No," said the stewardess. "I can't do this anymore." "He said to everyone," the invader announced, gently laying Eden's body on the floor. "So let more people know about it, and as soon as possible." "Did you kill him?" Julia asked with horror. "Did you have to?" Frank smiled. "Just put him into a deep sleep. But if you want, I can increase the dose, and then—" "No, no, please," the mother of many children exclaimed. "No, you don't have to. I'll do whatever you say." She took her cell phone out of her pocket. The battery was running low. However, if she didn't have long to live, it wouldn't make any difference. "Dear video diary," she said in a trembling voice. "Today is my first day of work. I happened to meet my ex-husband on board. He left me with 3 wonderful children. He traded me for some priestess. Next thing I know, we're hijacked. Frank says his demands weren't taken seriously, and that he's ready to go all the way. 2 minutes ago, he killed my ex-husband because he was being rude to the negotiators. Please understand that he's not kidding." She moved the camera to Evan's body. From the outside, it really could have looked like he was dead. "Please, the diary," shouted Julia. "I don't want my first day of work to be my last. I want to go home. She stopped the recording and held the phone out to her tormentor. He was smiling as wide as if he wanted her to fix her makeup, using his white teeth instead of a mirror. "Brilliant. Amazing," shouted Frank. It's just a celebration." "Glad you enjoyed it," the stewardess said wryly. "I love fooling people." "Oh, it's nothing, number one," he said. "They're ready. Aren't you cold?" Julia imagined her ex-husband lying in that cold, noisy room for the rest of the flight, and she felt sorry for him. You should be grateful to her, though. If it hadn't been for her. "Excuse me," Frank beckoned to Julia. "Come here." The mom of many children approached the invader. Yeah, said the stewardess. "I'm starving," smiled Frank. "What's on the menu today?" "Are you kidding me?" Julia said, "You gotta be kidding me." "I'm not some kind of madman or terrorist," smiled the invader. "I just need money." Suddenly Frank's face became concerned. He looked at the stewardess and said, "Can't you feel it? Damn it, are we changing direction?" And rushed out the door, leaving her alone with her ex-husband. Who would have thought that the fate of the passengers and crew members were in the hands of two high-ranking men? $50 million, the gray-haired man in an expensive jacket slammed the table. "That's a fortune." "We have to think about ratings," objected the second, who looked young. "It's only $50 million. What if no one gets hurt?" "What do you mean, no one?" The first one questioned. "One passenger died. At least one. I think the money should be transferred. And trace it." "Oh," whispered the old politician. "How callous I've become. I think about these dollars, not about mothers, not about children." "How many children are there?" "5," answered the young one. "5 young citizens of our country." "Okay," the gray-haired man in the jacket waved his hand. "Translate. Just tell him that if he cheats us, no, don't tell him. Just translate, that's all." 10 minutes later, the door to the room that Julia hadn't even realized was there opened again. An invader ran in, and he was terrified. "Help, well," he demanded. The conductress obeyed for some reason. She ran up and pushed the door closed. Frank immediately turned the lock knob. "Not enough time," he shouted. "There's a riot on our airship. Can you believe they tried to beat me up? That's bad news, but it's good news." Frank rushed to the wall, pulled 2 backpacks out of the closet, one of which he intended to put on himself. "So," said the invader, "what we have. $50 million transferred to my account. The algorithm immediately transferred them to crypto, then offshore, and then distributed them to the accounts under my control. $42 million, but almost clean." "I still don't understand any of this," Julia whispered. "Tell me, or are you going to blow up the plane?" "Nonsense!" Frank waved his hand. The pilots came to their senses. There was no tranquilizer. I gave them sleeping pills, 10 doses. This marshal came to his senses and untied their hands. Somehow they got in touch with the navigator and he started a mutiny. "Now I guess the plane will land on schedule." "That's good," said the stewardess. "But let's be honest," the invader continued. "You'll never be the same again, and they'll hardly believe you." "Believed?" Julia asked. "What do you mean?" "That you're not my accomplice," Frank smiled. "You've been helping me throughout this operation. Collected cell phones, calmed the passengers. Distracted that brainless cop so I could stun him. Finally, you gave me your card so I could get into the cockpit. Shall we continue?" "No," the stewardess whispered. She realized that he had stolen the card. "But I was just doing my job." "You had a motive to help me," the invader continued. "Ex-husband. He's sleeping it off. You're not going to get away with it. Then come with me." He leaned over the hatch and opened it. There was a great rumble and the plane rocked. Frank, standing at the edge of the abyss, took hold of his parachute bag. What happened in the next moment was forever imprinted on Julia's memory. Obedient to some unknown feeling, she accelerated and pushed him. Frank's face was contorted with fear. He staggered, took a step backward, and disappeared down the hatch. Julia struggled to lift the lid and shut it. Dear Video Diary, I just managed to disarm a terrorist. I didn't think it was that easy. Dear passengers, fly with Fred Flight. You will always be safe here.
Thank you for watching this video to the end. Subscribe to the channel. Like it, write comments if you like the story, and see you on the channel.